Jeanne Antoinette Poisson, or Madame de Pompadour as she is more commonly known, was an important member of the royal French court during the reign of King Louis XV. She had far-reaching influence and friends in many high places. She even went on to become the Chief Mistress of the King. Being the Mistress of the King was a position that came with apartments, titles, staff, and a great deal of respect. Jeanne was an ideal example of what was expected of a mistress, setting a standard for chief mistresses to come. Jeanne Antoinette Poisson was born on the 29th of December 1721 in Paris. Her parents were the rather successful François Poisson and his wife, Madeleine de la Motte. However, there were suspicions that her mother could have had an extramarital affair, which could have made Jeanne's father either the financier Jean-Paris de Montmartel or the tax collector Charles-François Paul Lenormand de Tournem. In fact, Lenormand de Tournem would go on to become her legal guardian after François Poisson fled town in 1725 as a result of unpaid debts. Growing up, Jeanne was known for being rather sickly. At the age of 9, she was sent home from an Ursuline convent in Poissy, where she'd been receiving a high-quality education since the age of 5, because she'd fallen ill with what was most likely whooping cough. After arriving home, Lenormand de Tournem arranged for her to have private education at home, paying for some of the best tutors he could find. Yet, she was never an amazing student when it came to traditional academics, but flourished under instruction in the arts. She was taught dancing, drawing, painting, theatre, and much more. She was known for memorizing entire plays and being a strong patron of the arts. As a child, after returning home from the Ursuline convent, Jeanne's mother took her to meet a fortune teller. There she was told that she would one day reign over the heart of a king. Jeanne's mother held tightly to that prediction, insisting that her daughter would one day fulfill that destiny. She began referring to her daughter as Reinette, meaning little queen. Jeanne had a happy childhood, one that eventually ended with her marriage to Charles-François Paul Lenormand de Tournem's nephew, Charles-Guillaume Lenormand d'Étiole, at the age of 19. Lenormand de Tournem, who was still Jeanne's guardian, was the person who initiated Jeanne and his nephew's relationship, because there was to be a rather large financial gain for him as a result of the marriage. After the marriage in 1740, Lenormand de Tournem made his nephew his sole heir, which awarded his estate at Étiole to the newlyweds. The property was located on the edge of the royal hunting grounds, something that would prove to be important for Jeanne's future plans. The marriage was a relatively happy one, as the two enjoyed each other's company, something that could not always be said for marriages at the time. Charles ended up falling deeply in love with Jeanne. If the same could be said about Jeanne is unknown, but she did care for him. She promised that she would remain faithful and stay with him, unless the other man in question was the king, but she didn't tell him that. During her time as a married woman, Jeanne was able to visit popular salons, which were places where men and women could gather for intellectual discussion in Paris. It was here that she would go on to meet figures such as Voltaire, Helvetius, and Montesquieu. She had impressive company, learning a great deal from the people she met. As time went on, and Jeanne herself became more popular, she created her own salon at Étiole, which went on to become incredibly successful. She became a master at conversation, perfecting her sharp wit that she would go on to be known for. Jeanne's marriage resulted in 2 children, a son who died in infancy, and a daughter, Alexandrine Lenormand d'Étiole, who was born in 1744. Alexandrine was loved dearly by her parents and grandfather, François Poisson. Unfortunately, she would ultimately die at the age of 9 of acute peritonitis, which caused inflammation in the inner lining of the abdomen and cover of the abdominal organs. Despite her marriage, Jeanne was certain that the fortune teller's words would ring true one day. She was determined to meet the King of France, Louis XV. Because the property she shared with her husband was at the end of the royal hunting grounds, she was able to observe the king and his men while they were out hunting. One day, she decided to purposely park herself in the middle of the grounds, despite the fact that she was not supposed to. She wore a blue dress while sitting in a pink carriage, and on the following occasion, she returned wearing a pink dress, sitting in a blue carriage. Just as intended, she caught the king's attention. He was extremely intrigued and sent her a gift of venison to express his affections. However, because the role of Chief Mistress was already filled by a woman named Madame de Pompadour, nothing could really come of the gesture. It wasn't until December of 1744, when Madame de Pompadour died, that opportunities began to arise for Jeanne. Less than a month after the former mistress's death, Jeanne received a formal invitation to a masked ball held at the Palace of Versailles. The ball would end up being a pivotal moment in Jeanne's life. The king publicly proclaimed his affections for her. At the ball, the king had been dressed as a yew tree, while Jeanne was dressed as Diana, the huntress. The costumes were supposed to represent their encounter on the hunting field, where the king had first seen her. To get Charles away, and as compensation for taking his wife, Louis XV offered him the position of ambassador to Turkey, but he refused. Charles was heartbroken and never forgave his wife for her treachery. He consoled himself with affairs with other women in Paris, having several children and later remarrying. By March of 1745, Jeanne had officially separated from her husband and secured her place at court as the mistress to the king. She was given royal apartments and the Marquisate of Pompadour, which made her a marquise. To be presented at court, one needed a title, and Jeanne's became Madame de Pompadour. On September the 14th of the same year, she was presented at court, escorted by the king's cousin. At court, Jeanne was determined to make sure her position was secure. To do that, she mastered court etiquette and befriended those in positions higher than her, especially the queen. Jeanne made it very clear to the queen, Marie Lexkinka, that she very much respected her role as queen, which could not always be said for other royal mistresses. She had no intention of replacing or overstepping her in any way. She wanted Marie to be sure of that. The queen seemed to both accept and appreciate Jeanne's gesture, officially accepting the new mistress. The role of chief mistress to the king was far more than sex. Madame de Pompadour became a duchess, and then the 13th lady-in-waiting to the queen, the highest role for a woman at court. She acted as a prime minister would. She was responsible for appointing advancements, favours, and dismissals. She even contributed to domestic and foreign politics. Her influence was so great that she was approached by Wenzel Anton, Prince of Kaunitz-Rietberg, a prominent Austrian diplomat, in 1755, asking her to intervene in the negotiations which led to the Treaty of Versailles, which promised mutual aid for France and Austria if either were to be attacked by Great Britain or Prussia. Her role as chief mistress saw the end of the 7 Years' War, which ultimately ended in France losing their North American colonies and falling into near bankruptcy. Madame de Pompadour was said to have comforted the king after the loss, helping him through the difficult time in his reign. Madame de Pompadour showed her support for a number of different figures and policies that would ultimately fail bringing more negativity onto France, who was already suffering because of their loss in the war. This support, and the way in which the king often listened to her ideas, led many important members of court to dislike her. Their disagreeing with her political beliefs, as well as annoyance with the king's love for a commoner, only worsened her reputation in the eyes of many. Despite the policies she favoured being disastrous for the country's post-war status, Madame de Pompadour was an advocate for ministers who would introduce important fiscal and economic reforms such as trade, infrastructure, and income taxes, which helped France's financial position. Despite her enemies, Madame de Pompadour was continuously supported by the king. Even after their sexual relationship ended in the year 1750, she remained his closest friend and advisor. The king was known for his bouts of melancholy, and it was often stated that only Madame de Pompadour alone could pull him from such feelings. Over time, she became the only person he trusted. She would throw parties and hunting trips just for him. Madame de Pompadour's support of the arts and Enlightenment era ideas could be considered her most important area of influence. She inspired and supported many, including the Physiocrate school, which paved the way for the father of economics, Adam Smith, and his theories. She went on to purchase a porcelain factory, a model for paintings and sculptures, and supported amateur printmakers and talented stage actresses in shows at Versailles. She's also said to have inspired the iconic Rococo style of art. Through her support of all things creative, she played a role in making Paris the perceived capital of taste and culture in Europe. By the time Madame de Pompadour's sexual relationship with the king ended, and her new role as friend of the king, which she'd hold until her death, was solidified, she was becoming ill. Since her bout of whooping cough at the age of 9 that had pulled her from school, she'd been sickly. She suffered from recurring colds and bronchitis, spitting blood, and headaches. She also had 3 miscarriages while involved with the king, which only worsened her already poor health. Madame de Pompadour died at the age of 42 after contracting tuberculosis. The king had remained devoted to her, trying and failing to nurse her back to health. While her enemies rejoiced at her death, the king, artists, and thinkers she supported were devastated. Voltaire wrote, "I am very sad at the death of Madame de Pompadour. I was indebted to her, and I mourn her out of gratitude." It seems absurd that while an ancient pen pusher, hardly able to walk, should still be alive, a beautiful woman in the midst of a splendid career should die at the age of 42. The king reportedly stated, as he watched her coffin depart from Versailles in the middle of a rainstorm, "La Marquise n'aura pas de beau temps pour son voyage," meaning, the Marquise will not have good weather for her journey. Thank you everyone for watching this video on Madame de Pompadour. I am Forgotten Lives, and I just want to say a huge thanks for everyone for subscribing and all the support over the last year. As always, if you did enjoy this video, please leave me a like and a comment down below. And if you're new, why not subscribe? If you have any suggestions, please send me an email which is in the description, or leave me a comment down below. As always, thanks, and I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life.